Test, test.
All right. Okay. I haven't tested the podium. Are you going to use the podium at all? Or?
I'll just use this while I'm up there.
Oh, okay. And
Tina will use the podium.
Tina will use the podium?
And probably the handheld. Yeah.
A handheld or a
well, check in with her, yeah.
There is a handheld up there on one of the chairs, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the clicker is...
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and Tina needs a... I tested his, but we haven't tested the...
Okay.
When you did your trip to Greece, did you plan it yourself or did you
No, we went on tour.
Which?
What was the name of the company? I'm blanking on it now. Not one I'd use again. So that, I mean, the trip was good, but there were like add-ons we paid for that never happened, and
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Shoot.
This one's working too. And so is this one.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. I am the Reverend John Cullinan, your minister here. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people and gather together in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are at this moment, here in the sanctuary or watching from home, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome to be a part of this community. I want to extend a special welcome to any visitors or first-time guests we have among us this morning. I invite you to join us for some coffee and conversation in the fellowship hall after the service. I would love to introduce myself, answer any questions you might have about our community here. If you are new parents among us, I invite you to have a conversation with the Reverend Tina DeYoe over here in the front row, our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, and she can tell you all about our programs here. And now please take a moment to get centered for this morning's worship. Close your eyes. Feel yourself rooted and grounded to the earth that sustains us. Take a deep breath in and out. And let us begin. Come one, come all. Come with your missing pieces and your extra screws. Come with your hard edges and your soft spots. Come with your bowed heads and upright spines. Come, all you flamboyant and drab, verbose and quiet, fidgeting and lethargic, all you with large vision and tender hearts, all you with small courage and tender fears. Bring your lisp and your stutter and your song. Bring your gravel and your drawl and your lilt. Bring your anger and your joy and your righteous indignation. Misfits and conformists and everyone in between, come into this space and be welcome. Bring who you are. Bring where you've traveled. Bring what you long for. And let us worship together on this beautiful morning. Would you all please rise in body or spirit and join in our opening hymn, number 360. Please remain standing and join in our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each and with all. Please be seated.
No, it's not. Oh, now it's on. Thank you. All right. Our candles that have been lit this morning are for our moisture that we have gotten this weekend. So that is very much needed. You can clap or silent clap. And gratitude for everything this congregation supports. So that is what has been written in our book this morning and with our candles lit. And this morning, we celebrate Mother's Day. Yay! So, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And we also celebrate all of the nurturing care that people give in this world. And I have this meditation today. It's some of our UU history and some texts from our UU history. And we're going to meditate on some of these words. But to give some background before we meditate on these awesome words for Mother's Day, I wanted to give the background of that we have as Unitarian Universalists many ancestors and present-day folks who have helped nurture people in our congregations and in our faith. And one of our UU ancestors, or Unitarian ancestors, who helped nurture our faith along in its path was Julia Ward Howe. And many of you are familiar with Julia, who lived to be 91 years and who died in 1910. She was a suffragist, an abolitionist, a writer, a poet, a reformer, and a lecturer. She also was a mother to 5 children. And Julia is most famous for writing the words of the Battle Hymn of the Republic during the Civil War in 1862. Julia Ward Howe's Mother's Day proclamation is also well known and is a testament to love over war, to nurturing care over war. She wrote these words in 1870 after the Civil War and during the Franco-Prussian War. The appeal was to womanhood throughout the world to unite for peace. It was a pacifist reaction to the carnage of war that the world had been experiencing at that time. A preface to this Mother's Day proclamation is that these words are written in the time of 1870, and the language is not gender inclusive, so bear with the reading. Let us listen to these words and meditate on these words this morning as our Mother's Day meditation. Arise then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether our baptism be of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands will not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, the women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate possession. As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace. and each bearing after her own time the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. We also know that our UU ancestors who have nurtured this faith do not do so alone, and that Black women and women of color, and especially persons of color, mothers and parents, have often not been recognized for being at the forefront of pushing white folks into action in our UU movement. And Julia Ward Howe was a white woman and an ally abolitionist. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was a Black Unitarian who also lived during the 1800s and early 1900s, the same time period around as Julia. Her words also should receive credit in the same vein as the Mother's Day Proclamation. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was also a poet, an author, teacher, lecturer, abolitionist, a mother, a suffragist. She brought to light the intersections of racism, classism, and sexism. So again, let us hear Frances Ellen Watkins Harper's words this morning as part of our Mother's Day meditation as well. Entitled, Welcome, Peace. Welcome, peace, thou blessed evangel. Welcome to this war-cursed land. O'er the weary, waiting millions, let thy banner be unfurled. On the burning brow of anger, lay thy gently soothing hand. Say to carnage and destruction, ye shall cease to blight the land. Plead in tones of love and mercy, mid the battle's crash and roar, till the nations new created learn the art of war no more. We lift up gratitude for all the mothers, grandmothers, stepmoms, adopted moms, the moms of furry animals, the nurturers, the mentors, the teachers, the therapists, the men who tap into their mother energy, those who teach us not to be constrained by gender or gender roles. We also know that lots of folks are missing their mothers on this day. We also know that lots of mothers are missing their kids this day. We lift up those who have struggled with their relationship with their mother or their child. And we also lift up all those mothers who have lost their children in times of war. We lift up all those war-torn areas now in our world, especially Gaza, where mothers are losing their children every day. And pray for peace and more nurturing care rather than more. May we remember all those who have taught us nurturing care on this day. May it be so. And let us sing now together our meditation hymn. And if all the young and young at heart want to come up to our worshiping space up here for our Time for All Ages story, hey, guys, come on up. So, not only are we celebrating Mother's Day today, but today in our service, we are celebrating this big word called pluralism. Does anyone have an idea what that means? Pluralism? What do you think?
I know what plural means.
Yeah, plural means, what does plural mean? More than one. Yeah, exactly. So it maybe is something to do with more than one thing? Yeah, that's a good response. Anyone else have any ideas? Yeah. So pluralism is, like you were saying, Ari, it's like having more than one of something, right? And so in our world, we know that there is more than one religion in our world, right? And so each religion has a different story that they like to tell, right? To people who believe that religion, right? And so we all, each of us too, we're more than one here on this earth, right? And so we each have a story that we can tell too, right? So there's different stories out there, different perspectives, different ways to think about things in the universe, on the earth, right? So we're going to tell a story from a different perspective. Many of you are aware of the story of the three little pigs, correct? Yep, maybe. And this is the story from the point of view from the wolf, right? How many of you read this one? Different perspective. Yeah, I see some hands. Oh, yeah. So, the true story of the three little pigs. So you may think you know the three little pigs, but again, we all have different stories and different ways to tell the stories. So this is the story from the perspective of the wolf. Y'all ready? The true story of the three little pigs by A. Wolf. Everybody knows the story of the three little pigs, or at least they think they do. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story because nobody has ever heard my side of the story. I'm the wolf, Alexander T. Wolf. You can call me Al. I don't know how this whole big bad wolf thing got started, but it's all wrong. Maybe it's because of our diet. Hey, it's not my fault wolves eat cute little animals like bunnies and sheep and pigs. That's just the way we are. If cheeseburgers were cute, folks would probably think you were big and bad too. But like I was saying, the whole big bad wolf thing is all wrong. The real story is about a sneeze and a cup of sugar. This is the real story. Way back in Once Upon a Time, I was making a birthday cake for my dear old granny. I had a terrible sneezing cold, and I ran out of sugar. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now, this neighbor was a pig, and he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house out of straw? Well, we build houses out of straw and mud here, right? Yeah. I know, right? So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it fell right in. I didn't want to just walk into someone else's house, so I called, little pig, are you in? No answer. I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. That's when my nose started to itch. I felt a sneeze coming on. Well, I huffed, and I snuffed, and I sneezed a great sneeze. Oh, like that, right? And you know what? That whole darn straw house fell down. And right in the middle of the pile of straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. He had been home the whole time. It seemed like a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner lying there in the straw, so I ate it up. Think of it as a big cheeseburger just lying there. I was feeling a little better, but I still didn't have my cup of sugar, so I went to the next neighbor's house. This neighbor was the first little pig's brother. He was a little smarter, but not as much. He had built his house out of sticks. A little better, right? Yeah. Well. I rang the bell on the stick house. Nobody answered. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? He yelled back, go away, wolf. You can't come in. I'm shaving. The hair's on my chinny chin chin. Yeah, if this is the real story, the pig changed it a lot. I know, right? I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on, and I huffed, and I snuffed, and I tried to cover my mouth, but I sneezed a great sneeze. Achoo! And you're not going to believe it, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. When the dust cleared, there was a second little pig, dead as a doornail. Wolf's honor. Now, you know food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open, so I did the only thing there was to do. I had dinner again. Think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better, and I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. So I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second little pig's brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He had built his house out of bricks. Yeah, he's the only one that's kind of smart, right? So I knocked on the brick house, no answer. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? And do you know what that rude little porker answered? Get out of here, wolf. Don't bother me again. Talk about impolite. He probably had a whole sack full of sugar, and he wouldn't give me one little cup for my dearest sweet old granny's birthday cake. What a pig. Fact. I was just about to go home and maybe make a nice birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed, and I snuffed, and I sneezed once again. Achoo! Right after he knocks on the door, he gets a sneeze. I don't know. Remember, this is one perspective of the story. The pigs told another perspective. So then the third little pig yelled, and your old granny can sit on a pin. Uh-oh. Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when somebody talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. When the cops drove up, of course, I was trying to break down this pig's door, and the whole time I was huffing and puffing and sneezing and making a real scene. The rest, as they say, is history. The news reporters found out about the two pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to borrow a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting. So they jazzed up the story with all of that huff and puff and blow your house down. And they made me the big bad wolf. That's it. The real story. I was framed. But maybe you could loan me a cup of sugar. And that is the end of our story told by the wolf. Remember, there's another story out there by the pigs. So, we listen to the different stories, and that's what we do here in our Unitarian Universalist Church, because there's different perspectives to everything, right? So thank you. And that's what kind of pluralism means, right? So that's that big word. So thanks for coming up. And you guys can go to the intention table, and there are some coloring sheets there that say Happy Mother's Day. So, you can draw your mom a Mother's Day thing.
So for many years now, I have been telling you the ancient creation myth about the great heart at the center of all things, the ancient creation myth I wrote about 6 years ago now. It goes like this. In the beginning, there was nothing save for the great heart at the center of all things, the source of all love in the universe. And the great heart was content for a while to just be the great heart, to be the source of love, until it dawned on the heart one day that it had not much to love except for its own self, and it wanted to know what it felt like to love something else and to be loved back. And so the heart splintered off many pieces of itself and sent them flying around the universe to create new worlds and new hearts in which to be in relationship with, in which to be connected to, with the hope that the hearts would learn new things and see new things, see the heart, the great heart, with new eyes, see the universe with new eyes, and eventually come back together in a great convergence where that bigger picture could be put together, and the great heart would know the fullness of the love of which it was a source. In my newsletter column for this month, I talked about one of my formative experiences on the way into Unitarian Universalism, which was watching the film of the Mahabharata around about my freshman year, well, in my freshman year of college, and watching similarities in stories and names and themes, and just having this moment of saying to myself, oh, I think perhaps God speaks to everybody in their own language and through the lens of their own culture. And so who am I to say that the religion I was brought up in is the one true one and the one right way? Maybe if I got off of that pedestal, I'd have a little more to learn. And these two stories have been bouncing around off of each other in my head since I've been thinking about our theme for this month. And I thought about what it meant for the great heart to splinter off all those little hearts into the universe. And I realized what happens next in the story is something akin to the story of the Tower of Babel in the Bible, where everything is scattered and all the languages change, and what was one people became a lot of different us's grouped around languages in the way they understood one another, and confusion entered the world. And all of this is myth-making, but I think it's clear that we do have a problem in this world. It is a huge human problem of each I, of each little you, us, only being able to see the world through their own lens sometimes. Some evidence fits the lens, and some is a little out of focus, and so that's not data we can pay attention to. It's hard to imagine sometimes any kind of a convergence of all those varied experiences, viewpoints, understandings, ways of loving. And yet this month, our theme is the exploration of the gift of pluralism, one of the new statements of value proposed in the new revision of Article 2, our principles, our purposes, our values. And I've meditated a lot on that word this month, and I've come to realize that word pluralism encapsulates so much about the values we express, about the principles that we express right now. world community that we seek, that is a product of celebrating our pluralism, acceptance of one another and our spiritual journeys and our encouragement to one another on our individual paths. That only happens if we are celebrating pluralism. Even upholding the inherent worth and dignity of each person requires us to celebrate that idea of pluralism, because we are all so unique from one another. And yet, we're feeling the divisions in our world today, I think, much more deeply than we've felt them in a long time. The chasms feel wide, the bridges feel rickety. It's hard to imagine closing those gaps and coming together ever again. And we seem to be hell-bent on maintaining those divisions for a sense of safety, for a sense of our own sanity, perhaps. It makes it easier to categorize the world and keep the people we're dealing with to a limited, small group. And what's the thing that keeps those divisions solid? What keeps driving the wedge further and further? It's the stories that we tell about one another, the stories that we assume about one another. Several years back, the Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie gave a TED Talk, and the title was "The Danger of the Single Story." The danger of the single story. And she tells many stories about her own experiences of that, the single story being the one thing we tell about others to make sense out of them. She talks about her upbringing. She's from Nigeria. She grew up in a university environment. Her father was a university professor. Her mother was a college administrator. They were a respectable upper middle class family in Lagos. Yet she came to college in America and was immediately greeted, and she talks about her roommate mostly, with the wonder of, "Oh, you're from Africa." And she says, of course, first, that's one single story that annoys me, that Africa is often referred to as just a country. Her roommate, she says, was surprised that she knew how to use an oven, that she knew how to drive a car, that she spoke English so well. English is one of the official languages of Nigeria. And so she felt diminished in herself, because all of a sudden she was surrounded by people who only had that one single story about what it meant to be from Africa. And that's really the source of our divisions there. Our sense of separateness is driven when we just accept one story about others because we're trying to understand something about our world, or at least make the world more manageable to ourselves. We accept one story and we disallow others that don't quite fit the lens, that don't come into focus for us, especially when they have any nuance or sense of depth to them, because that's a lot of mental energy to expend to start incorporating that new information into our understanding. And that sounds a lot like what they do, right? Having these simple, single stories about the other to get a stronger sense of who we are, or who they are in their we. Poverty is a personal failure, right? Homelessness is just a public nuisance. Immigrants are just job stealers. Mexicans are not the best people. Single, shallow stories. But lest we rest too comfortably on our own knowledge of being much more liberal, open-minded people, Achille goes on in her TED Talk to talk about the reverse experience she had because she traveled to Mexico. And she had internalized the single, shallow story about the Mexican people, even in her own mind. Even having the experience of being from Africa in the eyes of others, she understood the people of Mexico to be poor and unsophisticated and not very technologically savvy and almost a third world country. But being there with the people brought into relief for her, I have done the same thing that I have experienced. This story is much deeper than that. The story has more nuance than that. The story isn't just one story. My colleague, the Reverend Matt Alspaugh, in commenting on Achille's TED Talk, talks a bit about narrative therapy and this idea in that form of therapy of the thin story and the thick story. Thin stories, he tells us, are those that don't seem to have much detail or background to them. Thin stories tend to be the single stories that she talks about. They are often created and imposed on us by other people, parents, teachers, those in authority. And because of that authority, we tend to accept those stories without question. Thick stories, on the other hand, are built from the real evidence of life. They are rich with examples and full of details. They explore inner motives and outward forces that may have made a person act in a particular way. In the practice of narrative therapy, people are encouraged to create alternative stories to their thin stories and to thicken them, looking for the richness and the detail in their own lives. And I would argue looking for the richness and the detail in others' lives is also a piece of that puzzle. We hold single thin stories for multiple reasons. It's not anything nefarious. It's not outright evil, usually. We hold those single stories, those thin stories, because they've been passed down to us from authority, because it helps us have a sense of order about the chaotic world around us, even if that order is a false one. And it helps us to feel like we know something about the world around us. And if we know something about a group and about ourselves, it might even give us a sense of belonging to something, because we seek that sense of belonging so rabidly. Unitarian Universalists, for decades, had a very thin story about who we were. It's a rational religion. It's a church for atheists. Everybody in Unitarian Universalism is very well educated, and because of that education, everybody in Unitarian Universalism is very well off. That's who we are. We had a story about ourselves, and in the years following World War II, when we were trying to grow the movement, the headline in the advertisements that would go in local papers was, "Are you a Unitarian and just don't know it yet?" And painting somewhat of that picture. I might be editorializing a little bit here. When I joined Unitarian Universalism, there was a sense of it being the religious wing of the Democratic National Committee. Maybe not far off. I still remember to this day a letter to the editors in the UU World about 20-ish years ago where someone complained mightily that I joined Unitarian Universalism for the politics, and they were horrified that religion was somehow creeping into this whole equation. We have thin stories about ourselves. And even here in this congregation, when I first arrived in Los Alamos, there were two things I was told with definitive clarity about this church and the surrounding community. One, this was a humanist congregation. That was the flavor of it. And you called me. And two, Los Alamos was a very wealthy county, the wealthiest in the country, perhaps. Those were two big truths, two stories we told about ourselves as a community. And what I discovered is sometimes that led people to be gatekeepers to that thin story. I heard plenty of times in earlier years when folks who bent a little more theistic or even Christian would arrive here in the sanctuary. Why don't they just go down the street? There's already a place for them. Why do they have to be here with us? And I remember vividly the time that somebody introduced me to a newcomer, a single mother with a young family, who was introduced to me as our poor person. This is our poor person. Like they were our project, a pet, a box that was ticked off. They're different from the story we've been telling you, and we need to highlight that for you. Is it any wonder they didn't stick around too long with us? Now, I'm not telling these stories about us to shame anybody here. No one in here is responsible for any of those experiences. I just want to say that right now. But I just want to point out that the thin stories, the thin single stories, they're baked into our DNA as well. It's not just them. We all do it because we're all human. And when we hold on to those stories, when we hold them out like a checklist of who and how you belong, we close off connections and we shut doors to the very community we say we are reaching out to. And the truth is, the longer that I stayed here, the more and more the brittle thinness of those stories became evident. I learned very early on, even though I was told definitively this was a humanist congregation, that I could assume nothing about what any single person believed in here because they always surprised me. Always surprised me. I could make no assumptions about the people here. And also, that despite the wealth we proclaim, and we love to share the stories that come out in newspapers about the wealth of Los Alamos County, poverty was a thing here. And when I first got here and we talked about poverty, it was something that happened over there down in the valley. But it became very, very clear that poverty was here, and the story we told about wealth helped it to hide so we did not have to see it. And it wasn't just out in the wider community. Poverty was here, too. Started the minister's discretionary fund for a reason. The thicker story, if we are paying attention to it, points to that richness. Losing my place here. The thicker story points to the richness that we might have looked past or through otherwise, because we clung so tightly to the thin stories, to the single stories. I have read the search packets for and interviewed with a lot of congregations in the last few months. And every single one of them in their packets or in my interviews have asked some variation on the same question: how are you going to grow us? And rather bluntly and honestly, I answer, I don't know. I haven't gotten to know you all that well yet. There needs to be some time of infusion with us all. And even here, the question of growth is something of a mysterious one. I don't know how it works, and folks, nobody knows either. We are all making it up right now. We are searching for answers and throwing things up against the wall to figure out how those changes, how that continued growth, how that sustenance and maintenance is going to happen. And, sometimes we look back in time 20 years for the things that worked then and try to pull them forward, and maybe that'll work and maybe it won't. And sometimes we try to make guesses about what's going on in the community that hasn't seen us yet and how we reach out to them, and we don't know the answers to that yet because a lot of changes happen so fast we haven't had a time to recover from our heads spinning and trying to get our handle on that. But here's what I do know. And here's the partial answer I've been able to give congregations as they go about their search and I go about mine. The work we need to do on the inside is to prepare ourselves for what growth might mean. By which I mean, we need to embrace and live with the reality that no one here and no one there fits a single narrative. Nobody is a Unitarian Universalist and just doesn't know it yet. They know what they value, and they have a sense of what we value, and hopefully those things intermingle together. It's a question of how we communicate those values. But no one fits a single narrative. Not everyone coming through our doors has a PhD. Not everyone coming through our doors has a six-figure income. Not everyone coming through our doors comes from a nuclear family with parents and 2.5 kids. Nobody fits a single narrative of what Unitarian Universalism is. And I say we need to embrace that reality because the big concept from Achille in her TED Talk is simply this: the single story, especially the single story we hold about the other, robs others of their dignity. Does not allow them to be the whole person that they are. And if we lift up inherent worth and dignity as one of our great principles, as one of the values we share, we have to cast aside the single narratives in order to live up to that value, in order to be open to more people, to people coming to be a part of us. Because to affirm pluralism, to affirm the myriad of deep, nuanced stories that arrive at our doorstep and stay with us, to do that, to welcome the thick stories of each person, is how we get to that place of convergence. Is how we tell the whole story of humanity we are trying to tell. We need to be ready to see through the lens of another person, even if we don't understand it fully. To hear the evidence of their life experience as it is, and as real. And to not disregard the other because their experience looks a little blurry through our own lens. And we need to be ready, and not just ready, but eager to be transformed by the new stories that we hear, to find new depths in the story that we are telling together, because ultimately that will lead us to hold that bigger picture of the web we are all a part of, the whole point of this notion of convergence. To build a pluralistic community, to live into that value we express and the many principles that grow out of it, we need to approach one another with a sense of humility. To confess, and this is a hard confession, and I know I struggle with it, that we don't have all the answers, that we don't know everything, that sometimes our knowledge is just assumptions, and that we do not know the whole story because we're still telling it and still adding new chapters. And so we approach one another with openness and acceptance and the beginner's mind, ready to learn something new every day. You're all about to tell a new story. One of your characters is departing. It's a new chapter yet to start, and now is the time to engage in all the edits and the rewrites of the understanding of who we are, because it's all about us. May that story, whatever you tell, be rich and deep, and best still, ever evolving and expanding. May it be so. As we prepare to return to our daily lives, it is time to give something of the gifts of this congregation back to the wider community we are part of. It is time for our offering. During the month of May, all cash and undesignated funds we collect will be given to our friends at the Juvenile Justice Advisory Board in support of their work in the community. You may give through the basket this morning or through the Givelify app, which you can access with the QR code up on the wall here. The offering will now be accepted. May what you give bring you joy and into deeper relationship with this community. We've got a lot coming up. Here's some reminders and announcements for everything going on in the church in the next few weeks. First up, stick around after the service for our forum on work on the border of UUs. We have guests from our Silver City congregation sitting here with us today. So hang around and give them your attention. We've got a great story to tell there, I think. Our all-church outdoor mural painting will be painting the big firebox, the Bendel firebox in the median there, as well as the picket fence over around the playground. We'll be painting that with murals and other things together. Will take place next Sunday after the service, so please join us for that. Bring your painting pants and masks and things like that so you don't breathe in all the weird fumes. Pride Week is coming up. It'll be the week of June 9th through the 16th. Pride Fest is going to happen on June 14th on that Friday. We will once again have a booth out there. We don't know exactly what we're doing with it yet, besides some information. We're coming up with some new ideas. But if you want to spend an hour or two with us on that Friday afternoon and help reach out to the community and make our presence known, and honestly just be thanked by a lot of people for being who we are and where we're at, happens every year. Come join us for that. I'll have a sign-up genius ready soon for you to sign up to take part in that. June 9th here will be our Pride service on Sunday. We will be joined by other members of the community leading that as well, led by our own Reverend Tina DeYoe here. Summer camp's coming up at the end of June. This year it's a Dr. Seuss theme. Yeah.
Registration's coming out this week.
Registration will come out this week in your emails, so take a look for that. Take a look for leftover plants from yesterday's plant swap out in the fellowship hall here. And finally, the number one question for me in coffee hour for the last several months has been, what are you doing next? And my answer has been to shrug my shoulders and say, you know as much as I do at this point. But this morning, I'm happy to announce that on Monday evening, I was offered and have accepted the candidacy to be the next settled minister of the First UU Church of Berks County in Reading, Pennsylvania. So that is where I'll be headed. Thank you. And now would you all please rise once more in body or spirit and join in our closing hymn number 159. Friends, may life bless us and keep us. May the light of life shine upon us and out from within us and be gracious to us and bring us peace. For this is the day. This is the one wild and precious life we have been given. So let us all find a way to rejoice and be glad in it. Go in peace.